fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Falcoholic Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, here to bring you another Falcons 2023 7-round mock draft here with the NFL Combine officially behind us. We've got all those juicy numbers to break down, all those beautiful spider graphs on Mock Draftable, and all those terrific RAS charts over on RAS.football, both of which I will be referencing throughout the draft and going forward because athletic testing is important for NFL players. I believe Kent LePlatte, who goes by @MathBomb on Twitter, did recently do a study of it, looking at the average athleticism of NFL players, and the vast majority of NFL players on rosters are above a 7 on the RAS scale. So athleticism is very important, which should be obvious, but you would think that average athleticism would be the average NFL player, but really teams are showing that they're favoring the higher end athletes more and more. And it's because of upside, it's because of developmental potential and all of those things that are, we know, so important to NFL teams. And don't ignore the film though. Nobody should move on your board like hugely over the combine, like unless some crazy stuff happens. Some stuff did happen, unfortunately, at the top of the first day of the combine. We'll see what happens there. But ultimately you want to take everything into account, including the athletic testing. And now we have it for basically everyone. There will still be pro days and things like that, so things can change a little bit here and there, but, now it's just finalizing film grades, doing all that stuff, and we're going to be getting into plenty of that on thefalcoholic.com. We got a lot of folks working on scouting reports for you guys to sink your teeth into, but for now, just doing the mock draft. You'll have to be satisfied with that. We will be making all the picks, and because of Calvin Ridley's reinstatement earlier this week, the Falcons will officially get a 5th-round pick from the Jaguars in the 2023 NFL Draft. That, for the record, I've been assuming that in all of my mocks, so nothing really changes, but it is official now that the Falcons will have that 5th instead of a 6th-round pick. So that's always nice to get confirmed. This isn't a Ridley-related show, but everyone has asked, so I will briefly say, in terms of next year's pick, it's a 4th-rounder if Ridley makes the roster in 2023, which seems like a given, but if he gets cut, then the Falcons get nothing next year. The Falcons get a 3rd-round pick if Ridley hits various incentives in the contract, like I think it's a certain amount of play time and a certain amount of yardage or something like that. And then if Ridley signs a new contract with the Jaguars at any point, then the Falcons get a 2nd-round pick in 2024. So those are the details of that trade. That'll be more for next year's mock draft, but I've been asked about it a lot. So I just wanted to clarify that before we jump in. So without further ado, before we kick it off, guys, just want to remind you to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us that 5-star review if you enjoy the episode on your podcast platform of choice. We really appreciate everyone for doing that. And you can follow me at Falcoholic Kevin in the show, at Falcoholic Live on the Twitters as well. Let's get right into it, guys, starting with the 8th overall pick in the draft. So I'm going to go in a similar direction to a mock I did, I think 2 mocks ago, with taking an offensive tackle at 8. Previously, I took Paris Johnson Jr., so in the efforts to sort of mix it up a little bit, we're going to go with Broderick Jones from Georgia here at 8. And the reason for that is, I think, especially important now that we know that the Falcons will not be franchise tagging Kaleb McGary. There really hasn't been any sort of buzz at all about McGary getting a new contract with the Falcons. His asking price or expected salary, probably above $15 million. It seems like maybe the Falcons aren't interested in paying that much there. So we could easily see the Falcons with a hole at right tackle now if they do not elect to bring Kaleb McGary back. And while I do think they'll bring somebody in, maybe they just re-sign Germain Ifedi, who has been a solid starter throughout his career, didn't really get a chance because the Falcons had a lot of good luck with their tackle health, and Germain Ifedi didn't even really have to play. But I think he would have been fine. So bringing him back for a 1-year deal, still a smart decision. But I think given the importance of the run game, given the importance of building a strong offensive line, for everything Arthur Smith wants to do, and for benefiting your young quarterback in Desmond Ridder or whoever else they may bring in, the offensive line needs to be right. And I think at this point in the draft, you need to come away with a blue chip prospect if you're picking in the top 10, if at all possible. Now, there's some draft classes where there aren't 10 blue chip prospects, so you can't get one in the top 10, but there are prospects in this class that are going to be available here at 8. It's got some nice players. They just might not be the ones that you're used to seeing mocked to the Falcons. In this scenario, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter went, of course, early in the top 4. Then we saw Tyree Wilson go 5 and Christian Gonzalez go 6. So those are all the guys that I'd have at the top of my list for the Falcons defensive players. I'm still leaning that direction overall. But if those guys are gone, the blue chip guys that are left, in my opinion, are the 2 tackles in Broderick Jones and Paris Johnson Jr. I'd be happy with either one. I won't argue with anyone that has one over the other. For me personally, probably going to land on Paris Jones as my top tackle. The length is so absurd. I think he has a tremendous ceiling. He's a little bit cleaner in terms of his technique than Broderick Jones. But look, Broderick Jones is an elite run blocker with really, really good athleticism, like outstanding athleticism. He did finish, I believe, with a really high RAS. I think he was like 6th in terms of all offensive tackles, and it was in the high 9s. So his ceiling is just as high, if not higher, than Paris Johnson's. And he's already that really high-level run blocker. We know the Falcons do care about that a lot, given their emphasis on the run game. So I won't argue with anyone that has Jones ahead of Paris Johnson, and I wouldn't be shocked if the Falcons went with Jones over Paris Johnson either. So you bring in Broderick Jones. Hopefully he is your starting right tackle this year, but he's played left tackle extensively, so this is a guy that I think you can shift over to left tackle in 2 to 3 seasons when Jake Matthews is ready to hang him up, or you're ready to move on from Matthews at that point. So he could be a guy that does eventually become your left tackle, which shouldn't be a surprise given, he's a blue chip. These are both blue chip tackles in my opinion. So I think that's a really strong investment in the top 10, always getting those premier positions like an offensive tackle there. I think is very worth it in my opinion. The only other blue chip guy I think at this point that is going to be in consideration is probably like Bijan Robinson, and I know people don't want to hear that. I will do a mock with Bijan at some point because I do want to emphasize that I think there's a non-zero chance that it happens, but I would generally lean towards one of those top defenders if somebody falls, and they could. They just didn't in this particular scenario. Or the offensive tackles. That's sort of where I landed with that first-round pick. Generally, get the best player there, and then fill your needs, later on if you can. Don't reach for like a Miles Murphy, a Lucas Van Ness. I just don't think those guys are top 10 players. They could be eventually that high level of edge rushers, but to me, they're not there yet. Not over these top tackles or even Bijan, which is probably going to make some people angry, but that's just my opinion. So, nothing wrong with being against it. But Bijan is really good. If you haven't watched this tape, go watch it and see and come back to me and tell me how you feel. But moving on to the second round, pick 44. Going to take a quick sip here. Pick 44 in the second round. The Falcons here at 44, I think it's really important that they just take a look at the board and see who falls. This point in the second round, there's a really good chance you're going to be able to get one of those like fringe first round guys who just happen to fall. I would not feel boxed in to picking for need here. I think they should be flexible. I think Darnell Washington is a name that should be in consideration here. There's been some buzz that Michael Mayer, the Notre Dame tight end, might fall. He would also be someone I would consider here. Do one of the top receivers fall? I'm less interested in that, honestly, at this point. Do one of the top edges fall? Do one of the top corners fall? Whoever is the best looking, highest ranked player on your board, I think they should feel like they can go get that guy, maximize their value. And in this scenario, Maryland corner Deonte Banks was the corner that fell out of the first round. It has varied quite a bit in recent mocks with which guys go and which guys don't. But Banks at this point would be a steal, right? Absolute crazy athlete. Finished with a 9.99. So very close to being one of the most. He is one of the most athletic corners of all time, according to his combine testing. Measured in well, 6 foot, 197, hit a 4.35 in the 40, 42-inch vertical and 11 foot 4-inch broad jump. That's just absurd numbers. And from me talking about his athleticism, you might think, oh, well, Banks is probably like a raw corner, right? No, like honestly, Banks is one of the more consistent corners on tape. I don't consider myself like a cornerback expert in terms of all the variances and technique, coverage, and that sort of thing, but he looks very sticky, He's very physical. I think he's pretty comfortable playing off, playing press, playing all over the place. I don't really think there's anything he can't do. And he's clearly an elite athlete, has that CB1 ceiling, doesn't have the like most outstanding length compared to like a Christian Gonzalez or Joey Porter, but it's definitely good enough to be an outside corner. There's not really a limitation there per se. The big thing with him and why he might not go as early as the other guys is he's not really a ball hawk. He does get his hands on a lot of passes. He just doesn't catch any of them. I think he has 2 career interceptions. So he also did have a season-ending injury in 2021, which he came back from and had a great year in 2022. So I'm not super concerned about that, but it's worth mentioning. But yeah, I mean, Banks and Terrell would be outstanding on the outside. This is a super, super deep corner class. I do think if they miss out on like Gonzalez at the top, they would be wise to see if one of the guys that's like a fringe first rounder, and there's a lot of them, does fall to 44. Pick that up, fill one of the most important positions on your defense across from Terrell and really help bring that secondary up to where it needs to be. You throw Jesse Bates or CJ Gardner-Johnson in the mix, and now we're cooking with gas, right, in terms of the secondary. And it's just a lot closer to being ready than the front 7. So to me, I do sort of lean towards maybe if the value's correct, right? I mean, if there's a great edge that falls out of the first, then sure. But I think the secondary help here is going to be important for the Falcons. Moving to the 3rd round, pick 75, a familiar face here in defensive tackle Keanu Benton. Benton could go earlier. I think it's likely that he could go anywhere in the 2nd or 3rd round, somewhere in there. I don't really know. So if he does end up falling to 75, I'd scoop him up for sure. You guys have heard me talk about him on previous mocks. He's really athletic. He can play nose. He can play all along the defensive front. Looked really good at the Senior Bowl. Was the best interior guy there, and I just think he's a good player. He didn't quite like blow the doors off the combine. He's not like a Dontari Poe level guy or anything like that, which is why he might, fall into day 2 a little bit. I think he's really good. I think he could be a good starter as a 3rd round pick, and the Falcons need those interior reinforcements in a big way. So I would be really happy to come away with Benton there at pick 75. Round 4, pick 110, first 4th round pick. Sticking with the trenches here, going with one of the players that I like on day 2 that happened to fall. And that's interior offensive lineman Steve Avila from TCU. Really, my one question with Avila was, is he athletic enough for the wide zone? At the Senior Bowl, I was pretty encouraged by watching him do some of that stuff. I thought he looked like he moved fine. And then at the Combine, tested out well. 7.67 RAS, above average speed and agility testing. Clearly, he's athletic enough to do it. I don't think he's going to be a Lindstrom level athlete out there or something like that. So don't expect that. But I do think he did do this at 333, which is huge. It's been rumored that he's, been open to dropping some weight if he goes to a zone scheme team, and that should only help with that. So I'm a big fan of Avila. I think he really impressed at the Senior Bowl. The athletic box got checked for me. And I would probably have him slim down to like 320. And, he could play center and guard. Played mostly center at TCU, but played guard at the Senior Bowl. Looked great. So I think you can slot him in at left guard, slot him in at center, wherever he wins. And I think this is a tremendous value here too. Again, this is another guy that could go earlier, and that's going to be a theme here. A lot of the guys that could go in the 3rd round will be around in the 4th. That's how it goes. Like some guys go earlier, some guys go later. So if he does happen to fall here, I would scoop him up. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes, before pick 110. But a good value here if he does fall. Next, 4th round pick, similar story. Another guy that didn't quite, well, it's Tyler Scott from Cincinnati. First of all, a guy that was getting some like day 2 buzz. There were rumors that he was going to run in the high 4.2s. And people were really buzzing about him being potentially the fastest receiver in the class. And that didn't end up happening. Tyler Scott ran a 4.44, which you might think that's like slow compared to what some people are running. But honestly, that's still really fast. It's like almost 88th percentile in speed for a wide receiver. So like, it's still really, really fast. So he's definitely still a good deep threat. But didn't hit that like crazy high 40. So I think that does push him down the board a little bit, considering that he's just 5'10", 177 on the smaller side. Did have some really good explosiveness testing. 39.5-inch vert at 5'10" is nuts. 11'1" broad jump. So Scott's a terrific athlete, really explosive. And he's got plenty of deep speed. And the thing that you can't really put a number on is that connection with Desmond Ridder that already exists. So I would sprint to the podium to get Scott if he's still here in the 4th round. Again, another guy that could easily go in the 3rd round. But, some of these guys are going to fall, especially receivers, because there's a lot of them on day 2, especially in that late day 2 range in consideration. And I would love to reunite Ridder and Scott. I think that makes a lot of sense for the Falcons to get a guy in here that's familiar to help him hit the ground running faster. And I think Scott does have that good profile of a speed Z receiver that has that wide receiver 2 upside. And this is a deep receiver group, so I think you might be able to find that guy on early on day 3 if you're patient and you sort of pick the right one for your system. And I think that could be Tyler Scott. So moving on to the 5th round pick. We have to take an edge at some point, right? It's a great edge class. They need to come away with one of these edge guys. But I think the 5th round is probably the longest they can wait to get like one of the, I would say, like legit prospects that actually have starting upside, which is nuts that you could still get that at pick 161. But one of the last ones on the board was Ole Miss edge Tavius Robinson, who is rough around the edges, a bit of a tweener right now, but I think he has a lot of potential. 6'6", 257, tested out really well. I believe he had an 8.76 RAS. Looks more like that 4.3 end, right? That bigger frame. The Falcons don't really have that. I think they could really use a base end like a 5-tech guy. And Tavius Robinson just moves super well. Very explosive. Much better like lateral mobility bend than you would expect for someone that big. And the length, it stands out. He just doesn't defend the run super well. He's on the lighter side, right? At 6'6", you'd probably want him to be at least 265, 270. So I think there's going to be some work required to get him there. But I think like the traits are all there. The pass rushing, which you can't really, you can't teach that sort of speed. He's got those traits to be a starting caliber edge rusher. He just needs to get the run defending set. He needs to improve his technique a bit. And just gain a little good weight. And I think he could get there. So, we need to develop him, right? He's not going to be a ready product day 1, but hopefully after we've hired Ryan Nielsen, we can actually develop some of these defensive linemen and not just pray that they're a finished product when they get here. So hopefully that is the case with the Tavius Robinson. I like the value there. The Falcons do get one of these good edge rushers in this really, really deep edge rushing class. Last 2 picks are the 7th rounders. And at this point, you're just looking to get guys that have some kind of upside that can do something for you. Maybe you have a connection to that makes them more appealing. And the first one we're going to go with is one of the combine winners, Louisville linebacker Yasir Abdullah at pick 226. Interesting guy. I hadn't really seen him at all before the combine, but looking at it, he tested out super well, right? I think he had like a 9.47 RAS, ran a 4.47 at 6 foot 237, which is really, really good for a linebacker. Elite explosiveness testing, really tremendous athlete. The thing is, at 6 foot 237, he played edge. Like he played almost entirely edge for Louisville, and that's just not something he's going to be able to do in the NFL. Maybe he could have some strong side linebacker sort of reps where he lines up on the line of scrimmage and does stuff like that. He is a really talented pass rusher for that size. I think he had like 8.5 sacks this last year. He's really explosive. So he's got that pass rushing upside. I think he could be a demon as a blitzer. But he just hasn't played off-ball linebacker much, and that's going to take time to teach that. Doesn't really have experience in coverage, hasn't really done a good job at taking on blockers, which is not surprising when he's taking on offensive tackles, 6 foot, 237. But look, I mean, this is a guy that I think has really high upside, really athletic, and the Falcons do need linebacker help. And I think you can afford to stash him for a year and have him as a designated pass rusher, maybe a pass rushing specialist like blitzer. And I think he could play special teams for you and do a great job. So, no qualms whatsoever about adding that potential at pick 226. I mean, if you could get that good of an athlete that late, just take a shot. Just take a shot on him. Instead of trying to get him in as an undrafted free agent, which is going to be a whole mess, I'm sure, with a lot of teams interested in someone that athletic. So, final pick of the draft, round 7, pick 247, getting close to the end here of the entire draft. So, those of us that are doing a live show will probably be very annoyed with the Falcons picking at 247. So maybe they'll make some sort of trade and package these 7s for like a 6th or something like that to spare us having to watch the draft this long. But going with another familiar face for Desmond Ridder, a guy that tested out well, just was completely outshined by everybody else in his position. And that's tight end Josh Whyle from Cincinnati. Like I said, Whyle just looks like a solid tight end. That's why he's going in the 7th round. I think this is a guy that probably get drafted early on day 3 most years, but in this tight end class, where Whyle ran an 8.86 RAS, he's like not even in the top, 8, 10 tight ends in terms of his athletic score, which is completely crazy. So he's just kind of been outshined, kind of been forgotten. I think he's got good size. I think he's a work in progress as a blocker, but he did have an actual, I think this is the first year really in 2022 where he looked like a good blocker, like a plus. So I think he's been working really hard to get there. He's continued to put on good weight. And I think he's just a really rock solid tight end 2 prospect, tight end 3 prospect. He did run that 4.69, just the same speed as Michael Mayer. Over 6'4", like 6'4.5", got that size, got that arm length. And he had some good explosive testing too. So I think he's got good hands. I think he's just a solid tight end, and he's got the connection with Desmond Ridder. So give Ridder a familiar face, right? And the Falcons may keep as many as 5 tight ends. That's what they did last year. I think Whyle provides a lot more blocking ability than Felipe Franks. Obviously not quite as high an athletic ceiling, but if the Falcons don't bring back Michael Pruitt, they'll need more help there. I still hope they do, certainly. But I think it's a good low-cost addition. Make sure you get him. Don't risk him as an undrafted free agent. And, see what you can get. Have him compete with John Fitzpatrick, last year's final pick, and see who comes out the victor. And maybe he's a practice squad stash as depth. But, hey, pick 247, guys. A guy that I think could probably make the roster and be a good fit for this Falcons team that needs a lot of tight ends. They need so many tight ends. Yeah, that's it, guys. Those are the picks for the Falcons. Let me know what you think in the comments. Share your own mocks as well. You could do so on the site, thefalcoholic.com. Leave them in the comments. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Like I said, if you want to help us out, you can like and subscribe on YouTube. Click that little bell for notifications when stuff goes live. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Give the show a follow at Falcoholic Live. You can follow me at Falcoholic Kevin. And check out the Patreon too. Patreon.com/Falcoholic Live if you want to support us on a monthly basis. Get access to ad-free early editions of all the podcast episodes. And of course, check out the community Discord server. Link is in the show description. Come chat with us. Come hang out. It's a good time. We've got over 500 Falcons fans in there now. So it's lively. It's lively. I'll say that. It's a lot of fun, though, interacting with you guys. So check that out, too. Again, guys, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. We'll be back. I'll have another episode on Monday breaking down the priority re-signings for the Falcons before free agency hits. Legal tampering starts Monday. And then free agency itself kicks off Wednesday, and we'll have Falcoholic Live for you guys Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern to hopefully break down some good news, some positive news there. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching the Falcoholic Podcast. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.